Hello crawlers, it's time to build Dungeon Crawler Carl as a playable character in Dungeons & Dragons. I absolutely love this series, and for those that don't know, Dungeon Crawler Carl is a book series written by Matt Dinneman and insanely well narrated by Jeff Hayes over on Audible, which that's the way I've been listening to all of it. It's absolutely amazing. It's not even a sponsorship or anything with Audible. I just love listening to it, but I've been a huge fan for a while. The entire series is absolute chaos and mayhem, but that's what makes it great. The entire concept is that the whole world gets thrown into a apocalypse. Most of the surface world is destroyed, and then the remaining survivors have to duke it out in a giant dungeon crawl, but the entire world gets game mechanics added to reality. So all of these survivors trying to make their way through a dungeon crawl get to choose a class, a new species, and tons of spells and skills that can upgrade their ability to survive and fight against the monsters or other crawlers that they're going to come across. And it takes it to another level because this entire dungeon crawl is actually televised for the universe to just enjoy. It gets completely absurd, super chaotic, and the entire thing is run by an absolutely insane artificial intelligence that has a bit of an obsession with the main character Carl's feet. And Carl is who we're going to be building here. He does have a cat that kind of becomes his best friend, even though it's his ex-girlfriend's cat, and his catchphrase is literally "God damn it, Donut," because it drives him so crazy throughout the entire book series. But even that cat, Princess Donut, does get its own sentience and ability to communicate and all sorts of other craziness while still thinking that they're an actual princess. But that's enough of me going into the book. I just really like the series. Let's actually build Carl as a playable character. Now, I could build Donut as well, but she has a very chaotic class throughout the entire book series where it's constantly shifting and changing. So if you want to build Donut, you can grab a tabaxi, make them small, try and use some sort of monster wrangling skill like dominate monster or something so you can get your own pet dinosaur like Princess Donut does in the books, and then get the most chaotic class you can because that just fits the character, so go with the Chaos Sorcerer. That being said, let's actually focus on Carl. Now, for the species, there's a bit of a toss-up. See, when he gets into the dungeon crawl, he is able to choose a new species, and he chooses Primal. Being a Primal is sort of this original concept of a species that was able to propagate the universe, but it has this hidden power that's sort of revealed throughout the books. But Carl is able to maintain a very human-like appearance with this species. So even though I was tempted to go with maybe an Aasimar for the primal aspects, or maybe even a Goliath, I'm going to be sticking with human. Mostly because we can start leaning into what the artificial intelligence is so obsessed with, grabbing a feat. And we need to boost your survivability because the survival rate of anybody in Dungeon Crawler world is not great. It is pretty darn low, actually. So we're going to grab the tough feat, giving us an extra 2 hit points of health per level of this overall build. Then when it comes to a background, we're going to focus on what makes a background a background. It's all about before you start adventuring. And Carl, in the books, was actually a marine technician. So we can choose either soldier or sailor. We're going to go with sailor because it helps our build a little more. This gives us skill proficiencies in acrobatics and perception. Then it gives us the Tavern Brawler feat. And the Tavern Brawler feat is actually going to fit us pretty darn well, because we need to be doing lots of unarmed strikes with this build, because that's usually what Carl does. He's punching and kicking or squishing things with his bare feet, because that's what the AI really likes in the series, and Jeff Hayes is able to narrate that portion a little too well at times. But this feat grants you enhanced unarmed strikes. So now when you do an unarmed strike, you can do 1d4 of damage plus your strength modifier, replacing the bare minimum damage that an unarmed strike usually does. This feat also grants you damage rerolls, so if you ever roll a 1 on your unarmed strike damage, you can re-roll it, but you have to use the new roll. You also get improvised weaponry, so you have proficiency with improvised weapons. And finally, you get push. So if you hit an enemy with an unarmed strike, you can actually push them 5 feet away at the same time, but you can only use that benefit once per turn. Then it's time to choose a Dungeons & Dragons class. But in the books, we have a bit of an interesting class that Carl chooses. So we're going to try and add in the classes that Carl gets to choose, but still mix it into the Dungeons and Dragons aspect, because he actually becomes a compensated anarchist and then later an agent provocateur, which isn't really a spoiler or anything. It's kind of hard to know what those are if you haven't read the books, but trust me, they're all about sabotaging, building traps, and just bringing about a bit of chaos. But he does lots of punching and kicking and squishing, but he's also very strength focused. So we're going to go ahead and start with a barbarian, and we're going to do a very weird multi-class here. But being a barbarian is actually pretty helpful because they have the highest starting health out of any class in D&D, so we're going to have some pretty solid health throughout this build. And being a barbarian would fit us also because of our species, because the max level feature from being a barbarian is called Primal Champion, and you are a primal. So that would work on multiple levels, but we're definitely not going to get to 20 levels of barbarian alone. The first thing you get from being a barbarian is rage. And I like to add a catchphrase for any barbarian I ever play. So when you go into a rage, you say that phrase. And there's already a fitting one for Carl, and that's just to say, "God damn it, donut." But when you activate your Barbarian Rage as a bonus action, you get a whole bunch of bonuses. First, you gain resistance to all normal types of damage. Next, you get Rage Damage. So anytime you're doing melee damage using Strength, you can add a +2 bonus to it. That does upgrade to a +3 by level 9 of Barbarian, but we won't be getting too far beyond that to get to the +4 later. Also, while you're raging, you get advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws, but there is a bit of a cost to it. You can't cast spells and you can't concentrate on spells. This is going to be very important to keep in mind later, but there is a weird way around it that I figured out while doing this build. Also, at first level of Barbarian, you get unarmored defense, so your armor class is 10 plus your dexterity modifier, plus your constitution modifier while you aren't wearing armor, but you can still use a shield and have this apply as well. However, in the books, Carl actually has this leather vest jacket thing that he wears, and he actually adds patches to it that give him various boosts. So he usually wears some sort of armor. So we're going to rely on that a bit and probably be using our medium armor whenever possible. Second level of Barbarian gives us Danger Sense, so you have advantage on dexterity saving throws to avoid taking any damage. Second level of Barbarian also gives us Reckless Attack, so you can give others advantage on attacking you in exchange for you getting advantage on all of your attacks for the turn. Then at third level of Barbarian, you get Primal Knowledge. Again, leaning into that primal species. This just gives you another skill proficiency, and we already got a couple others from being a barbarian, but I'm not focused on them too much. I would just try and make sure to grab animal handling to deal with Donut as much as possible, because unfortunately there's no skill to deal with a very special kind of doll head that constantly talks back to you. But yeah, you really should read these books. Also at third level of Barbarian, you get to choose a Barbarian subclass. And I think one that fits Carl super well is the Berserker Barbarian. This got updated post 2024, so it's actually usable now and actually pretty good. It starts off by granting you the feature Frenzy, so you can actually get some bonus damage. When you do a reckless attack, the first target you hit on your turn takes some extra damage. It's an amount equal to 1d6 per point of rage damage. So you have a +2 for rage, meaning that you do an extra 2d6 of damage, really helping out the fact that you only have a d4 for unarmed strikes. Then at fourth level of Barbarian, you get an ability score improvement. And Barbarians are pretty much made to be min-maxed, focusing on all the physical stuff, but we're not going to be doing that. We're going to be having a bit of a weird spread. Here is our starting ability scores. It's going to make more sense later. Then we get to throw 2 more points into strength, boosting it up. Fifth level of Barbarian gives us extra attack, so you can attack twice per attack action now, and you get fast movement, so you get a bonus 10 feet of movement speed. Sixth level of Barbarian gives you mindless rage, allowing you to resist some charmed and frightened effects. Seventh level of Barbarian gives you feral instincts, so you have advantage on initiative checks, and then you also get instinctive pounce. So on your bonus action when you enter a rage in the first place, you can move up to half your movement speed. Then at 8th level of Barbarian, you get another ability score improvement. So we're going to go ahead and max out your strength. Then at 9th level of Barbarian, you get Brutal Strike. So now when you recklessly attack, you get an extra 1d10 of damage. This damage only kicks in once per turn, but that means that you're really mitigating that lower damage die of unarmed strikes, and you really want to be using reckless attack as much as possible. Then on top of that, your Brutal Strike allows you to add an additional effect, either going with Forceful Blow, pushing an enemy 15 feet away from you, and then immediately being able to move up to half your movement speed without provoking an opportunity attack, which you can mix with the extra feature from your Tavern Brawler feat, which would allow you to push 5 feet as well, so that means you can push 20 feet. But you can just as easily use Hamstring Blow instead, which reduces a target's speed by 15 feet. So if you mix that with pushing them, that means that you push them 5 feet and slow them 15 feet, so it's a lot more battlefield control. Now, we will be doing a multi-class, and I want to call out that right here, if you were to multi-class now, there's something that you would get that would be super cool, but I want to get 2 more levels in Barbarian because there's some other stuff I want. But I'll call out exactly the weird, cheesy thing you can pull off if you do it just right. But to take 2 more levels in Barbarian, first at 10th level, you get Retaliation, thanks to being a Berserker. So when you take damage from a creature that's within 5 feet of you, you can use your reaction to attack them. And then at 11th level of Barbarian, you get Relentless Rage. And Carl has a few regenerative abilities, and so I wanted to emphasize that with Relentless Rage. So you can keep fighting despite being dropped to 0 hit points. So if you get knocked to 0 hit points, you're able to make a DC 10 Constitution saving throw, and if you succeed, you get an amount of hit points back equal to twice your Barbarian level. And you can keep doing this, but every time you do, the difficulty increases by 5 points, only resetting back down to 10 when you take a short or long rest. Now, we've hit 11 levels in Barbarian, and we got most of what we wanted here. Now it's time to lean into the anarchist side, where we want to be building traps, and Carl does have some firearm proficiency and some other interesting stuff. So the best way to do that is by multiclassing into Artificer. And this is probably the first time I've ever done a Barbarian Artificer multiclass before. Becoming an Artificer gives you Tinker's Magic, so you can start building some traps right away, with caltrops, hunting traps, and ball bearings for when you need them. But also, thanks to being an Artificer, you get some spell casting. And you have to remember that Rage doesn't allow you to cast spells without breaking from being enraged. You can't cast spells and you can't concentrate on them. So we need to very carefully select spells that will be helpful while still remembering that we're a Barbarian. Now, there is a way around this, which is if you took 2 levels less in Barbarian. Because if you got to 11 levels in Artificer, you can get what's called a spell storing item, allowing you to place a spell inside an item, and then you can activate the spell's effects. In the wording of this feature, it specifically states you're activating the spell's effects. You're not casting the spell. So if you prepare a spell storing item ahead of time, that means that you can still be raging and activate some spells, or technically kind of cast spells, but not really, because it won't break your rage. It's a weird little caveat that allows you to get around the rage restrictions, and I just wanted to call it out because I figured it out and I felt like, oh my god, this is kind of cool. I really want to use this at some point, but I didn't want to do it for this build. I just got excited. Anyways, for the spell casting, we get to choose some cantrips to start. First, we're going to grab Guidance. This is going to help with any skill checks that you or Donut needs to do when you're going through the crawl, and you're probably going to need those pretty often. And Guidance is really useful for not being in combat, so it's not going to conflict with being in rage. Then there is a lot of sending messages to other crawlers and stuff, so we'll grab the cantrip Message. Then when it comes to some first level spells, you want to grab Cure Wounds. You need to be able to heal yourself whenever possible, and you're just going to want to do this outside of combat. Then Carl does get a spell called Protective Shell at one point in the books, so we'll grab Sanctuary. This is probably the best way that we can replicate that for right now. Then we want to grab one other boosting spell with Long Strider, because that'll just boost up our movement speed, and it doesn't require concentration and lasts a decent amount of time. Then it's more about setting up some traps. We'll grab Grease, which doesn't require concentration and just makes an area very slick. And we'll also grab Snare. It allows you to set a trap to string up your enemies so you can attack them later. Then at second level of Artificer, you get to replicate magic items. And this is the more tinkering side of your anarchist abilities. You get to create magic items, and you can use them for yourself or your allies. Now, we want to make sure we can boost up our armor class, because despite the fact that we went Barbarian, we don't have a ton of points in Constitution, so we want to boost up your defenses a bit by grabbing a shield, and we'll get a +1 shield. So if we mix a +1 shield with the best basic medium armor we can get, that makes our armor class 20, which is pretty solid. Then Carl has the ability to find some traps, and we don't have access to the Find Traps spell, but there's another way we can work around this with the Wand of Secrets. If you create a Wand of Secrets, you're able to find hidden doors and traps that are nearby. You have a number of charges you can use to find them, but this is a great way to get around not having that spell. Carl does use gauntlets pretty often, so we're going to grab the Wraps of Unarmed Power. This gives you a +1 bonus to your attack and damage rolls with unarmed strikes, boosting up our unarmed strike damage even more, and then it also allows you to turn your unarmed strike damage into force damage when you need to. Then at 3rd level of Artificer, you get to choose an Artificer subclass. And we're going to focus on the traps, and we're going to focus on the fact that Carl does know how to use firearms pretty well. So we're going to go with the Artillerist subclass. This gives you the feature Tools of the Trade. So you have proficiency with martial ranged weapons, you're proficient with woodcarver's tools, and you're better at making wands. It also gives you some artillerist spells, so you have a few spells by default without having to have them prepared, and at this point it just grants you the shield spell, boosting your armor class by 5 in an emergency situation, and Thunder Wave, which is a small AoE that allows you to push enemies while damaging them. But the big thing about being an artillerist is that you get an Eldritch Cannon. So you can use a magic action to create an Eldritch Cannon, and then you can fire it off any bonus action you have after that. So you can set it up as a turret, or you can hang on to it if you want to. Either one works great, and both of which fit with the character. And once you're already in a rage, you don't have to worry about using your bonus action for many other things going forward. So having this at your disposal is pretty helpful. You can use your Eldritch Cannon for one of 3 options. The first is using it as a flamethrower. So you can blast in a 15-foot cone in front of you, dealing some fire damage equal to 2d8, but they have to make a dex save, and if they fail, they take full damage. If they succeed on the dex save, they take half damage. Another option is to use it as a Force Ballista, shooting an enemy up to 120 feet away with force damage while also pushing them 5 feet further. It's still going to be a straightforward 2d8 of damage, but both of these are going to rely on your intelligence modifier for the attack rolls or the spell saves. They do reference making a spell attack roll, but they're not actually casting a spell, so I would say that this is totally allowed while raging. The last option is as a protector. It bursts out with positive energy, giving 1d8 worth of temp HP plus your intelligence modifier. But this actually doesn't just hit you, it affects everybody within 10 feet of you that you choose. Then at 4th level of Artificer, you get another ability score improvement. And we want to focus on our intelligence now, so we'll throw 2 points there. 5th level of being an artillerist gives us Arcane Firearm, so now you do an extra 1d8 of damage whenever you cast a spell using an Arcane Firearm, which you can assign to be either a martial ranged weapon or a wand of your choice. And speaking of a wand of your choice, if you're worried at all about having slightly lower intelligence for any of your spell attack rolls and stuff, you might want to also grab a Wand of the War Mage +1. It just gives you that +1 bonus, so you can mitigate having slightly lower intelligence. But speaking of spells, at this level you get access to 2nd level spells as an Artificer. Thanks to being an artillerist, you get Scorching Ray, blasting an enemy with a few beams of fire, and you get Shatter, which is a little AoE of thunder damage. Think of this as more of a concussive grenade. Then when it comes to spells you can choose, they're going to be mostly support type spells, with Aid boosting up to 3 people's health by +5, and this boosts both your hit point maximum and your current hit points. Then we'll also grab Lesser Restoration to remove some slightly minor impairing conditions you might run into. Then at 6th level of Artificer, you get Magic Item Tinker, allowing you to turn one magic item into another, or destroy a magic item to get some spell slots back, or you can recharge a magic item if an item uses charges. But you also get a higher tier of magic items you can create, but we don't have a ton of extra items available, so we're just going to grab a +1 half plate. This is going to boost our armor class to 21, which is very helpful for surviving the dungeon crawl. Then 7th level of Artificer gives us Flash of Genius, so as a reaction, when you or somebody nearby fails a saving throw or a skill check, you can add your intelligence modifier to it. 8th level of Artificer gives us another ability score improvement. But technically, this is level 19 overall, which is the only requirement for having an epic boon. And I was tempted to just grab 2 more points in intelligence and not take an epic boon because that's still very helpful as an artificer, but I think it's more important to focus on survivability when it comes to surviving any of the Dungeon Crawler Carl books. So we're gonna grab the Boon of Fortitude. This gives you plus 40 to your hit point maximum, which if you're raging, that means it's going to go even further because you have resistance to so much damage. But also, thanks to this epic boon, when you regain hit points, you're able to add your constitution modifier to the amount that you regain. Then at 9th level of Artificer, we can finally really focus on doing more traps type of damage. And this works in 2 ways. First, thanks to being an artillerist, we get explosive cannon. And this gives us 2 features. So the first one is that the cannons are boosted in power with what is appropriately called firepower. Both the damage and the protector feature of your Eldritch Cannon get boosted by an extra 1d8, but you also get the feature detonate. So if your Eldritch Cannon gets damaged, you can just blow it up. You use your reaction to detonate it after it takes damage, and in a 20-foot area of effect, it does 3d10 damage. The damage is force damage, so pretty much nobody can resist it, but we can actually compound this effect a little bit because we can also choose some spells that'll be helpful. First, we're going to grab Dispel Magic because you want to disarm anybody else's traps, but you want to grab Glyph of Warding. This allows you to place a barely visible glyph either on the wall, on the floor, or hovering in the air, whatever you need. You can set the trigger for it, which there's actually a ability that Carl gets called Trigger, so I think it's fitting. And whenever anybody sets off that trigger, you can have this glyph activate one of 2 effects. Either Explosive Rune, so it just basically blows up, and in a 20-foot radius, it does 5d8 elemental damage. So that means acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage. But you can also use Spell Glyph. So you can cast a spell directly on the glyph itself that is a level 3 spell or lower. And that's actually helpful because thanks to being an artillerist, you get some additional spells. You get Wind Wall for a defensive option, but more importantly, you get Fireball. So you can attach Fireball to this glyph if you want to, or just set it to explode normally. And then you can also have your turret nearby, so it gets a bit of a double whammy. It can set off the glyph, doing a bunch of damage, whether it's the glyph or the fireball, and then as a reaction, you can detonate your Eldritch Cannon, doing even more damage. So it's a very powerful trap. And that brings you to 20 levels overall. I feel like you managed to get every aspect of Carl into this build. I mean, even the fact that he can sew patches onto his vest that boosts up his stats, which is exactly what an artificer is basically doing with their replicate magic item. I'm very proud of this build, and I wanted to do this build because Dungeon Crawler Carl is coming out with their own tabletop RPG. So I figured this was also the perfect time to try and port him as a character into Dungeons & Dragons. If you want access to a character sheet for this build or any of my other builds, they'll be up on Patreon, link down below. But if you made it all the way to the end of this video, let me know by hitting that like button. And I'll be here hoping you roll at least 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session, especially if you want to kill as Dungeon Crawler Carl in Dungeons & Dragons.